everyone. Here's a question for you all. Where are you from? Pretty simple, huh? It's a classic favorite in introductory banter. It's a blank space that you fill out on surveys, job applications. Most people can answer it with one word, maybe two or three. Now, that's a stark contrast to anyone else who might have a genuine mini dilemma whenever they hear the same question. Sound familiar? Well, maybe that's because your family's a potluck of ethnicities, and you never know if you should relate more to your mom's side or your dad's side of the family. Maybe you left your small hometown at age 18 to move to the city of your dreams, and only then felt as if you had found your home. Or maybe your childhood was a myriad of different cities, to the point where you never quite feel as if you can do justice to the question. Now, the question seems especially daunting if you're a TCK. So what exactly is a TCK? Tonight I want to share my story with you all to give you a better understanding. Now, the most transparent, most outer layer of my identity is South Korean, and I'm sure that's clear from my appearance. But I only lived in South Korea for a quarter of my life, and I wasn't born there. I was born in Sweden until, before I even turned 2 years old. My family moved to Madrid, where I stayed until I was 4. In Korea, I attended kindergarten and completed my first 2 years of elementary school. Then I finished elementary school in Miami, and then some time again in Seoul, and then a very short time in Southern California. Too short if you ask me. And then finally, my family moved to Frankfurt, Germany. Now, in case you've lost count, that's 7 different cities in my 17 years of age. 5 countries and 3 continents. Now, if I'm walking into a room and that's the way I introduce myself, that might shock everyone. But if I'm saying these same things to a fellow TCK, it's just a relatable tale. TCK stands for Third Culture Kid, and Wikipedia defines it to be a child raised in a culture other than their parents or the culture of the country given on the child's passport. Now, don't worry, you don't have to be a kid to identify with us. I myself only discovered this term a few months ago. I was browsing the internet when I came across an online article. That took me to the Wikipedia page, which was so exciting to find out that this idea has expanded itself to be a subculture, and we even had a Wikipedia page. Now, being a third culture kid inevitably has its undeniable perks, but it also comes with its challenges. Tonight, I want to share with you 3 lessons that I learned growing up as a third culture kid. Now, this is kind of a given, but third culture kids tend to be familiar with various different cultures, different languages. I myself speak 3 languages, Korean, English, and Spanish. I consider both Korean and English to be my first language, nearly fluent in Spanish. Now, any multilingual person will agree that the transition between the languages comes easier with time. To me, it's comparable to a switch. There's this subconscious switch in my brain that I can flick on and off when I'm switching between the 2 tongues. Now, a certain level of proficiency helps you switch between the languages, but that's not so much the case when you're switching between cultures and juggling different traditions. It's just not that easy. I myself have moments where I'm hesitant in social situations just for the reason that my past experiences are at a conflict as to how I should react. It's like this. I first went to school in the United States when I was in 3rd grade. Until then, I've only gone to school in South Korea. Now, a few months into my first school year, I forgot to do my homework. Now, in defense of my 3rd grade self, when your favorite cartoons are on TV and your addition problems just don't seem to be doing themselves, homework might not be your first priority. Now, when my teacher found out, she called me and a few other peers aside. And the first thing she said was, "Why did you not do your homework?" So I responded the way I had always been taught to. I looked down at the floor and I didn't say anything. Because in South Korea, if a teacher is scolding you, or even talking to you for that matter, it's rude to look them dead in the eye, or talk back. Now, more questions followed, but I did not look up, nor did I say anything. This offended my teacher, and she wrote an email to my mom commenting on my lack of respect and reflection. This was very off-putting for me because what I had done was what I knew to be an indication of reflection, and respect. My mom had to explain to me that things were different in this country. You had to openly communicate with adults just as you would with your peers or your family. Now, thankfully, my next few years of American schooling raised me as the strong-willed, independent, and articulate elementary schooler that the American education system encouraged me to be. Then came my second transition, and this is where the story gets interesting. I moved back to Seoul, and I entered Korean school. Now, I had a conflict with a peer at one point, and we were called into the teacher's office. I'm not quite sure why this story is portraying me as this troublemaker who never does her homework and picks fights with her peers, but these are very rare cases, I promise. The conversation that followed was bizarre. All I did was explain my perspective, try to justify my actions, and I tried to get my peer and my teacher to understand where I was coming from. Instead, I was instructed to cut it out with the defiant look in my eyes. I'm sorry, cut it out with the what? And that's when I realized that the student standing next to me wasn't making half as much eye contact with the teacher as I was, nor was she saying half the things that I was. And it hit me. I was going through another cultural crisis, so similar to yet the exact opposite of what I had experienced 4 years ago now. However trivial these two situations may seem, for me, they serve as a reminder time and time again of how ideas such as respect are universal, but the expectations of the corresponding etiquette and behavior may be different depending on the country. Since then, I've been very, very conscious of the way I treat others from these two cultures, my two cultures. So the first thing I want to share with you today is embrace all cultures, but be mindful of the gaps in between. Learn to recognize and appreciate these gaps. The next idea that I have for you today is that it's a small world. Here's the thing about being a student at an international school. For kids like me, this place is a safe haven. On a day-to-day basis, I'm interacting with students who come from backgrounds just as multifaceted as I do. I mean, I'm sure that diversity of the FIS student body is reflected in our audience today. Please raise your hand if you're living outside the country on your passport. Take a look around. You can put your hands down now, thank you. As you can see, a school like FIS puts a student in an environment where they're surrounded by people who have the same broad perspective, the same multicultural background. What FIS also does for students is it gives us these amazing experiences to meet students that come from other parts of the world and who are attending schools just like this one, except on the other side of the globe. Now, this can be anything from attending a Model United Nations conference, participating in an honor music festival, or even just being a member on a sports team. Now, I'm constantly in awe at how these short encounters let us make friendships that last forever. But at the same time, I find this inexplicable sense of comfort in the idea that it's a small world after all, just like the ride at Disney World. Here's what I mean. There are 195 countries in the world, give or take a few, depending on your political stance. My IB Global Politics class taught me better than to jump to conclusions on these kind of statistics. What that class also taught me is that the rise of globalization means that we're all interconnected as citizens of the world. Technology has made the other side of the globe just as approachable and accessible as our next-door neighbor. Sign an online petition or email a faraway politician if you feel the need to. I have a friend in Seoul who has been working on these fundraisers to help North Korean refugees adapt in their transition. And I was able to help out just by sharing a few links on my social media. Another friend of mine in Florida has been doing amazing things to raise awareness about global warming, starting from our hometown in Miami. Cultures share ideas, and countries share values. It's Time for us to start realizing that it's a small world, and it's time for us to start thinking of people in other countries as our neighbors. The personal connections that we form today, maybe even tonight, with the audience member next to you, this might be your gateway to making an impact on the world tomorrow. Now, the last thing I want you to take home with you tonight is that it's okay to be different. It's an overworked cliche, and it's something that you see in every poster on any high school classroom, and it's also the underlying theme of any high school movie. But it's so important for us to understand this, especially if you're in your teens, so I'll say it again. It's okay to be different. It took me a while to convince myself of this idea. Now, here's where the emotional baggage of being a TCK comes in. There's this sense of being homeless. I've never, ever felt quite at home anywhere. In the United States, I was always the token Asian of my friend group in all my classes. Even when I'm visiting my family in Seoul, I can never quite call Korea my home. Here in Europe, I'll always be a foreigner. I've been labeled as too Korean to be American, and paradoxically, too American to be Korean. Belonging has always been something of a concept for me, nothing more, nothing less, a concept that I can convincingly display but never truly achieve. But as it turns out, this flexibility in my identity might be a good thing after all. Once I started believing that I was an interesting person, and that my perspective was valuable, and that my background was unique, it helped me realize that no one really minds if you stand out a bit from the crowd. I mean, we're all different. The myth that there's this conventional standard of normalcy is a big challenge that every individual faces. Third culture kid or otherwise, teenager or otherwise. As an adolescent girl, I've fallen victim to the standard of conformity myself. It took me 8 years, but my amazing teachers, friends, and family have helped me realize that every part of your identity is there for a reason. They complete and amplify each other. If you find yourself at the right place at the right time, you'll see that belonging is nothing more than this construct that you've made up in your head. Because if you're with the right community that makes you feel welcome, you won't need to change a thing, or you won't need to feel as if you have to change a thing to feel as if you belong. Here's another thing about teenagers. Not only do we not know who we are, we have no idea what we want to do with ourselves in the future. We change our minds on who we want to be every day. Of course, there are the few exceptional cases where students have had this one-track dream since they were 5 years old and they're thriving towards it, and I applaud this. But in my frenzy of environments, I've realized that it's perfectly normal for your dreams and aspirations to change every day. I mean, the world's way too exciting for us to set in stone what we want to do tomorrow, next month, in 10 years, no matter how old you are. So develop an attitude of resilience, not conformity. I'd like to finish with an open message to every third culture kid, whether you're an infant or my age or a whole lot older. I want you to know that, first of all, TCK really stands for the cool kids. No, but really, I know it's a tough ride with all the goodbyes, all the confusion, all the moving, but at the end of the day, you are a product of the globalized world. You're a child of the universe, and the universe is pretty amazing. And on that corny note, I'd like to recap the 3 ideas that I shared with you tonight. The first one is appreciate and recognize the gaps between cultures. The next one is that it's a small and accessible world, and stop trying to belong. Thank you.